Welcome back, crew. Today we are reviewing our March game of the month, Symbaroum, by one of my favorite RPG publishers, Free League Gaming. Shoutouts to them. I've not played anything I haven't liked from that company, and Symbaroum is no exception. So today we're going to be once again stealing a page from another D&D podcast book and going through our roses, what we liked about the system, thorns, things that may not have clicked with me with the system, and buds, things I'm excited for with this system in the future if I get a chance to play it again. So, before we dive into it, though, as always with Free League, the art's on point. The book is well made. I feel like I've never bought a book from them. I've been disappointed flipping through the pages. Symbarum's no different. The art really kind of conveys the tone of the world, which it's kind of in a new civilization springing up in the midst of the ruins of an old civilization with heroes and most of the adventures taking place in those ruins. It gives a real kind of just dreary, danger lurking around every corner feel, and the art reflects that, and I always like when the art kind of reflects the theme of the game. And it's really like, if you've not played it before or read the lore, it gives me a real Dark Souls-y feel with kind of how you're exploring through it. Just these ruins of a great civilization gone to the history. So first off, shout outs to the art. Some other cool things on this side, and if you watched my character creation video or the first impressions video, you know this is probably my number one. I love that it was a classless system. I've really been enjoying those, especially if you've been playing TTRPGs for a while and sometimes you feel hemmed in by a class. Pick up Symbaroum. The classless system is fun, especially for a fantasy game. Typically where I've seen the classes have been like with Mutants and Masterminds, the superhero games, or GURPS, or all those other ones. But it's nice when you get one for a dedicated fantasy game, which Symbaroum is, and you can go through and pick and build what makes sense for your character. So I had a blast with that. We built Vicinero, and we got to run them in the actual play of it. And it was just fun having all these different tools from different aspects. We had some aspects from being a caster with his magic. We had a lot of social aspects, or some pieces of social aspects too, and then a ton of different combat attributes to really let our persuasive shine, and so we could rely on our main skill. We did a little min max in there, but it was fun, especially for a solo play. So that's really big rose for that. Big shout out. I want more games in the future to go to this classless system. I find it fun, and I thought they did it a really good way with this one because you had classes for people like me who just want to go through and pick whatever they think is fun, but you also had the option to pick different archetypes where if you like having the guidelines, the rails of a class, you can do that too without changing anything. So it gives people, if you have two sets of players in your group, it gives both of them the tools to be happy, which I love, because sometimes having a true classless system can be overwhelming. I love Mutants and Masterminds, but Mutants and Masterminds, and it can take a lot for the DM to talk through people who may not be used to that. But with this, they can just pick the archetype, and the people who want to dive in the weeds can dive in the weeds. Along with that, though, even if you do dive in the weeds, it's a pretty quick character build process and still having some good depth to it. So I like when they can kind of get those two levers appropriated right. And so with this, I feel like you can really go through and pick what makes sense for your guy, but you're not going through and flipping through pages and pages of the book and looking at rules and going back as much and forth. You're going to do a little bit of that because it's a TTRPG, but some can get a little crazy. Mutants and Masterminds again, but I do love you, Mutants and Masterminds. But really cool piece there. I've already touched on the lore and atmosphere. I wish I had a little bit more time to do a deeper dive on the lore, but it was just cool. I like the setting. It really gives me a Dark Souls-y vibe, and I'm really looking to see more. I'm looking forward to seeing more of that sometime. One of the big ones too, and shout outs to Parts Per Million. I'll throw a link into the drive-through RPG for them. But this game does really well solo play. And Parts Per Million gives a few more tips and tools for running solo play with this. As always, scheduling can be the nightmare of any game master or TTRPG game. My players weren't able to join me for this one, so I kind of went on it alone. And finding Parts Per Million, I think his name's Pete, his walkthrough of how to do solo play for this definitely helped. But even outside of that, I feel like this system, even if you don't use Parts Per Millions, is really set up to easily run solo play. Game masters don't roll dice with this. You know all of your DCs based on your attribute, and if you're doing contested for fighting somebody, you know what their modifiers are and how that affect your attributes. So this one's a very easy one to pick up and play solo. without having to worry about setting your own DCs or things like that. So really big shout outs to that. I had a lot of fun with it. I talked a lot, but it was definitely a blast, and it was easy to do because you had those DCs there. You didn't have to worry about yourself metagaming because you just have to roll below your attributes. Also, shout outs to them. Everybody knows I love D20 systems. I was happy this was a D22. And I'm actually starting to enjoy these roll below, because I'll admit with the One Ring, I think I may even put it as a thorn. I wasn't sure about the roll below attribute piece, but I'm starting to feel these a little bit more, especially because I think I may start doing more solo plays, because I've had a lot of fun with that one, and I think it's just a cool system to do, especially if you don't have time to get a group together. Your group can't agree on a time to get together. It's a fun way to still play some TTRPGs and really stretch your creative muscles. Game Masters, I recommend. There's going to be a whole video coming about that probably next week, so no more on that. But yeah, also with that too, the attribute system, the way they roll it with the D20 and having to roll below your attributes with just simple modifiers affecting the DCs, it makes the game run so much quicker. It's going to be a thorn of mine with Game Masters not rolling dice, but I think without Game Masters rolling dice, it does speed up the game. So it's a weird one. So it's when I see both sides of it, but usually as the guy in the GM chair, I like to roll dice. But this one, it really was quick. For solo play, it worked well. I imagine, too, for group play, it would have that same kind of quick feel to it, which is always good for kind of keeping the pacing, keeping the tone of the game going. You don't want to get mucked up in mechanics, so being able to keep it moving is definitely a benefit. So huge shout out for a rose on that side. But yeah, those are all my roses. I definitely love the game. I love the feel, the atmosphere. I like the dice system. I really, really, really like being able to build my own PC without the constraints of classes. So a lot of cool things with this. So next, we're going to hit buds. So some things I think would be cool in the future. My big one, since I did do this as a solo play one, I'd love to run an adventure for a table with this one. With how quick it is to build a PC and pick up and play, keep an eye out for it. This may be one that we kind of revisit when my table has a little bit more time. So stay tuned for that, but that was definitely one of my bigger buds for it, because it's just a really cool system. It was easy to pick up and play. It had some cool lethality to it, even though, actually, shout out for another rose. If you haven't watched the actual play, my character Symbaroum should have died, but the dice tell a story. Even with kind of everything stacking up to kill him, the defense rolls were saving his life. So that was just really cool on that side. It's just one of those ones that has some cool lethality, but you could definitely get some good swings on there too. Also, with that, so kind of moving from the buds too, we're going to dive into the thorns, some things I may not have liked as much with this system. So one of the big, and I already kind of shouted it out, I love to roll dice. So the Game Master in this system doesn't roll dice at all. For basically, the players roll their defense rolls to see if the monster hits. If the monster hits, they do flat damage. So there's really nothing on the Game Master side for the rolling, but it does, kind of in theory, I haven't run it for this one. It does kind of free the Game Master up a little bit to be able to focus on the narrative, focus on describing what the enemies are doing, kind of plan ahead, because they're not rolling the dice and doing that quick math in their head or looking at the virtual tabletop to spit it out of what happened. So small thorn on that side for me, but definitely I just like rolling dice. Last thorn too. So this one is a little bit of a thorn, and definitely one I kind of noticed too when I was going through after building Symbaroum, is I wish there were more exploration and social pillar attributes, or I should say abilities. So I feel like the attributes are good, but the abilities, the different pieces you can buy with your experience, I feel like they are geared like 90% towards combat. And there's a lot of books for Symbaroum. They have like an advanced player's guide. There's more expansions. I didn't buy those. I haven't read through those, so there may be more in there. But I wish there was more kind of social pillar as well as exploration pillar ones for the attributes to really set your PC aside or kind of allow them to stand out in those attributes. Because especially with Symbaroum, I feel like it's a perfect exploration game. I'd love for some more cool attributes and abilities to reflect that. So that's a little bit of a thorn on that side. And definitely shout outs in the comments if you do know. I haven't had a chance to look through some of the expansion books on that. That could be something they've addressed, because this is, I think, Free League's most developed game, I'll say. And what I mean by develop is it has tons of different additional expansion books, both for true Symbaroum, but they also have Symbaroum 5e. So if you wanted to, for any of like the game masters out there, like, hey, this world sounds cool, but I don't think I can convince my players to try a new system, they've got it out there. I haven't looked at it all, so I can't tell you how it runs, but Free League's never let me down, so check it out. It should be pretty good quality, and see if it kind of fits your 5e game style. So cool in that. But even just the base game, the true kind of Symbaroum experience, there were monster books, there were advanced players guides. There's a couple other books I'm forgetting off my top of my head. Just a lot of cool resources out there to be able to run this game and have developer support. Which, if I had to say one small thorn in Free League, sometimes there's not as much of the cool stuff out there, expansions and pieces, and I was really happy to see that with Symbaroum. So definitely check that piece out. But overall, yeah, this is just a review of Symbaroum. I really enjoyed this game. Really, keep an eye out. We're going to be doing more, hopefully, with this one because I think a lot of my players would like this one, just they weren't available for it. So I may run a one shot with this down the line, just get that group experience and see what they'll think of it as well. But we're already in April, so we're going to be diving into a new game of the month. And this is one I am pretty stoked for. If I've had one kind of RPG that's been at the top of my list that I haven't had a chance to play, it's Call of Cthulhu. So this has been one that's always been one that I wanted to run. Usually I prefer being in the Game Master seat, but this is probably the one I'm going to be, one I've always wanted to be a player in, not as a GM necessarily. So I'm actually going to be bringing in an outside GM. I'm not sure who yet, but we're going to give him some major shout outs throughout this month once we do get him picked. And they're going to run it for me and my crew. Giving us that full Call of Cthulhu experience, and I'm going to be in my player's hat for this one. But no worries, we're still going to be running this like we usually do. We're going to go through our first impressions, building a PC, core mechanics. It's just there's going to be a different game master in the seat for this one, so I'm pretty hyped for it. But yeah, thank you guys for hanging out as we went through Symbaroum. Definitely shout out in the comments some pieces that you liked about the system. Maybe some of your roses and thorns for this, or even some cool stories about your PCs and how they've gone through the world. Like, I really had a blast with the Sinro. I was still shocked he made it alive. Spoilers for the actual play. But yeah, it was just really cool, and I definitely like this system and hope to do more with it in the future. But yeah, shout out in the comments, like, subscribe, and then get ready for Call of Cthulhu next month. Till next time, crew.